So picture this, it's 1921 and two of the most legendary boxers at that time were about to duke it out. It was Jack Dempsey versus Georges Carpentier. This is a legendary boxing match, and one of the reasons why it's so significant is because it was so well publicized. It was all over the newspaper. It was everybody was talking about this particular fight, and the fight ended up doing so well and making it into boxing history as the first fight to ever bring in $1 million. And why this is such a big deal at this moment in time is because there was no like pay-per-view, there was no like, you know, online streaming kind of way to generate income. This only generated $1 million because of one thing alone, and that is ticket sales. $1 million back in 1921 would be the equivalent of having $17 or $18 million today. And that's why this fight is so significant, is because all that $1 million was generated through ticket sales. But the question that I was thinking about when I was reading about this story is, what would $1 million actually buy you in 1921? I apologize, this is going to depress a lot of the millennials out here, because think about this. Imagine if you could buy a house for just $5,000. Well, that's what the average home price was back in 1921. I think today in Canada, it's kind of coming down a little bit. We're somewhere around $700,000 to $800,000 Canadian to buy a house. I'm not too sure where you are at right now, but that's where I'm at, and yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. I couldn't imagine ever spending, I mean, $500,000 would sound like a good deal in Canada, never mind the $5,000 that it took to buy the average home in 1921. So $1 million hypothetically could buy you about 200 homes, which is kind of crazy to think about. And I was thinking, is there any other asset out there that you would consider buying if you had $1 million in 1921 and were trying to just preserve that wealth? Well, in 1921, $1 million could also buy you 46,360 ounces of gold. And I think a lot of people would say, wow, 200 homes, that sounds like so much work and a lot of maintenance, and I don't want to deal with that. So maybe I would look to something like gold. But then again, if you're trying to store 46,360 ounces of gold, then I think there's going to be a few logistical problems that you're going to have to work out there as well. So I'm not really sure one is better than the other. But one thing that I could say is that back in 1921, interest rates were almost 7% in the US. Somewhere around 6 to 7% is what I was reading online. And if you're thinking about maybe investing in something like, for example, a house or maybe even gold, then you have to consider where interest rates are in this cycle. Like, for example, in 1921, we were pretty high on interest rates, 7%, not necessarily historically high, but we were much higher than we are there today. And what I've noticed over long periods of time is countries will go through cycles where they essentially start with very high interest rates, like 16%. That's where, you know, we were not too long ago here in Canada. And by not too long ago, I mean like, you know, 30, 40 years ago or something like that. I guess my time horizon is expanding as I get a little bit older. But we were not long ago at 16%. Now we're pretty much close to zero. And the cycle of interest rates plays out when inflation starts to become a problem, because what happens is investors try and flock to government bonds, but if inflation is high, then they're going to demand higher interest rates for those government bonds. And the thing that I was thinking about is, like, if we were to make this $1 million investment today, would you buy the house or would you buy gold? And because of the interest rate cycle, and if inflation starts to become a little bit more of a problem, we are at historically low interest rates. And if inflation becomes a problem, then we need to go higher. not lower, right? And of course, you know, things could play out in the short term that, you know, maybe we go back to 0% in the short run, but over time, generally currencies die off because they take interest rates from high to historic lows, let's call that 0, and then over time, interest rates float back up. And that is because governments always end up printing a bunch of money and they dish it out to people. They spend it on like random services that the people ask for. Inflation becomes a problem. The currency starts to lose its value and interest rates need to go higher. So the question is, if you had 46,360 ounces of gold in 1921 and held that to today, it would be worth $231,850. Now, like I said, that doesn't sound like a huge return, although that is fairly significant, especially when you consider, you know, $1 million today in 1921 was inflation adjusted to just 17 or $18 million. Whereas if you put that money into gold, 46,360 ounces of gold today would actually be worth $231,850. So that's a pretty good return. And the question that I was thinking about, and the reason why you clicked on this video, is because you want to know, when will gold hit $1 million per ounce? And the math here isn't exact, but if the same price performance happened and just repeated, like from 1921 to 2025, we could just extend the time horizon out. Like, for example, if we start today and go to 2129, then gold would actually be worth $1,190,475 per ounce. So I don't know if, you know, there's you could find the exact date, but if the same thing just repeats over the same amount of time, then we're going to be at $1 million an ounce somewhere in the 2100s, which is kind of crazy. But the question that I would ask myself is, what does $1 million buy in 2129?